On February 1st, 1960, the Greensboro Sit-In was started with four African Americans named Ezel Blair Jr., David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil being denied service just because of their race. These four young African American students staged a sit-in in a segregated lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and refused to leave after being denied service. This racist policy of serving only whites led to four colored men to carefully plan and organize the sit-in against the policy. This became known as the Greensboro Sit-In. The four young African Americans stayed put until the store closed, then returned next day with hundreds of students from local colleges.
The SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, emerged from the first wave of student sit-ins and formed at an April 1960 meeting organized by Ella Baker at Shaw University. In only a short period, the SNCC grew into a large organization by consolidating student activists from around the country to set the stage for nationwide sit-ins, planning and implementing several initiatives to push for civil rights throughout the 1960s.
Students became an active voice in the civil rights movement, especially after the Greensboro Sit-In, which brought a wave of student activism such as the SNCC and major sit-ins performed by other young African American students looking for reform. Students from the Census Bureau suggest that after the sit-ins, even though the number of young African American voters declined throughout the 60s and 70s, it spiked after that. This is mainly due to the enforced voting rights laws. Also, according to this other graph, the number of young people protesting increased within a year, especially for African Americans. Although the nonviolent method of protesting decreased in popularity amongst young people, over time the main long-term outcome of the Greensboro Four is still noticeable today. Student activism now takes a role of political influence. The news brings up student gatherings and their importance of the young voices far more than a lot of other movements. Students have a constant outcry in today's media coverage, causing heavy political influence. This is especially noticeable in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting that sparked outrage amongst the nation and a massive movement that got its own hashtag, March for Our Lives. The Parkland shooting occurred February 14, 2018. The shooter Nicholas Cruz was led into the school and turned on the fire alarm to draw people out, and started opening fire with an AR-15, killing 17 and injuring more. People of all ages are now being inspired to be participating in this movement, but it is students from that very school who are taking charge of it.
The most prominent leaders of this movement are Alfonso Calderon, Sarah Chadwick, Jacqueline Corin, Emma Gonzalez, Cameron Kasky, and Alex Wind. The movement was even featured on the cover of Time magazine. The movement's main goals according to its website are universal comprehensive background checks, bringing the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives into the 21st century with a digitized searchable database, funds for the Center for Disease Control to research the gun violence epidemic in America, a high-capacity magazine ban, and an assault weapons ban. The anger of this worldwide protest is understandable considering America has the highest level of gun violence in the developed world, according to the FBI Homicide Index Home Office. Members of this movement are constantly railing against the National Rifle Association for lobbying Congress into making it easier to buy guns, which they are. However, many even go as far to suggest that the NRA profits off of and enjoys the deaths of little children.
She wants Congress to take action and says that they won't. Are you kidding me? She owns these congressmen. She can get them to do things. It's just she doesn't care about these children's lives.
They also make certain claims, like we live in the 21st century, but we only have 18th century gun laws. In other words, there are no laws regulating guns aside from the Second Amendment. Is this true? Is the movement making progress? And will the reforms actually make any difference?
The idea that there are no laws regulating firearms is far from true. The first significant piece of national gun control legislation was passed on June 26, 1934. The National Firearms Act, or NFA, which imposed a tax on manufacturing, selling, and transportation of the firearms listed in the law, among them short-barreled shotguns and rifles, machine guns, firearm mufflers, and silencers. The most recent and important pieces of federal legislation are the Gun Control Act of 1968, which prohibited felons, the mentally ill, and others from purchasing firearms, also required that all manufactured or imported guns have a serial number. Other examples include the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993, requiring that background checks be completed before a gun is purchased from a licensed dealer, manufacturer, or importer. All the laws stated exclude the dozens of regulations of individual states that have been imposed.
On top of that, another argument commonly used to debunk the arguments of the March movement is that since criminals don't follow laws, they will find a way to obtain the firearm anyways, as they do with drugs and as minors commonly do with alcohol. This can be seen with the shooting in Maryland this year, just about a month ago, where a 17-year-old shot 2 other students with a handgun. According to Giffords Law Center, Maryland prohibits anyone under 18 to possess a handgun and generally forbids open carry. Also, as seen by these 2 infographics, there seems to be no relationship between gun control and mass shootings. However, it is worth noting that even though drugs and alcohol are still obtainable, they are harder to get and less people get them than had they been legal.
Not to mention, CNN reports that the FBI was warned 5 times about the shooting, and local law enforcement actually noticed some red flags as well. But for some reason, the FBI didn't adequately respond like it's supposed to. It will never be known why. Regardless, the pressure from the movement compelled Florida lawmakers to pass the following reforms: raise the minimum wage to get a gun at 21, ban bump stocks, raise the waiting period to 3 or more days until the background check is complete, arm school employees and train them, increase school security, expand mental health services. It does not, however, ban AR-15 high-capacity magazines or strengthen background checks.
Whether the NRA, government inefficiency, ineffective school security, our mental health care system, a combination, or all of these are to blame, one thing is for sure. This movement will not stop unless there are comprehensive reforms on the federal level. Also, what we witness now is different from previous movements in history. Unlike before, we can share ideas, spread news, and spark an entire movement within a click of a button. This movement brings up issues that go far beyond gun violence. These issues include school security, campaign finance reform, mental health reform, and perhaps the issue that has divided Americans ever since the birth of our nation: federal versus state rights. Supporters and critics of this movement both have valuable views to offer, but they also make outrageous claims about each other. When one side says the other wants to take away all guns from good law-abiding citizens, the other suggests that people who don't agree with them don't care about little kids. This is not the way to go about this. True reform will only happen through compromise and cooperation. Otherwise, we will never again live up to our name, and we will continue to be the divided states of America.